Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today on the website of Tennants Auctioneers based in the UK, we're going to have a look at their latest auction. Now this is a mixture of musical instruments and cameras and tools, but we're just going to have a look at the musical instruments section for this. There's about 100 lots of musical instruments, so we're going to have a look and see if there's anything interesting. Now we've been on Tennants quite a lot and they do sometimes have interesting stuff. I'm often a bit critical of how they photograph things. Let's see if they've changed from before, if it's still the same, but in any case should be interesting. This is a UK based auction, so bear that in mind if you're looking to get something shipped abroad. Import, export fees, shipping, CITES restrictions, all of that fun. You can see here 24%, that's the buyer's premium, so whatever the final hammer price is of the item, you'd have to pay 24% on top. Well, probably 28.8 with VAT and stuff, so bear that all in mind. This auction finishes on the 31st of January. It's the 28th today, and in a couple of hours it'll be the 29th, so a few days left to go. Before we get started to look at the catalogue, I'd just like to say if you do enjoy these videos, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, turning on notifications, all of that kind of fun stuff, because that would really help and be much appreciated. So without further ado, let's just crack on and see what we've got here. So we've got a cello. Doesn't seem to have any kind of label. 800 to 1200 on that. So let's have a quick look at this. You can see it's had quite a few repairs on that. Lots more images here. Evidence of a neck head graft. Yeah, that's right. Lots of other pictures here. Let's try and skip through. Quite an interesting looking cello actually. Be one of those ones that'd be quite nice to look at in person. It's definitely had a bit of work done to it for sure, but like I said, Tennants do usually have some fairly interesting stuff. Glad to see that they've got a few more pictures on here. That is pretty good. There's a bow as well. This bow seems to be silver mounted. You can see pin as well on the adjuster. So yeah, all in all, I think an interesting lot. I wouldn't like to kind of comment on what it is really. Not sure I can ascertain that from these pictures, but yeah, an interesting looking cello for sure, with a very reasonable estimate, and it'd be interesting to see what it sells for. Like I said, good to see these extra additional photos. I think that's really positive step here. Right, lot 2, another cello here with a Strad label, the classic label, so we can see a few pictures here. This looking a bit more like a kind of trade cello, I would think. And looking at the back there as well, I would stick to that assumption, whereas the other one was slightly more interesting, I would say. 800 to 1200, it's in a hard case. No additional photos for this one, but you know, I think those photos are enough to work out what it is. Right, a double bass here. No label, 1200 to 1800 on this one. See if we can see. I don't have much experience on double basses at all, but they can be quite problematic in terms of damage. They're quite bulky, so it's easy for them to get knocked. Especially the older ones can often have a lot of issues. That's a few more pictures floating around here. So yeah, I think that estimate, it's probably not unreasonable in the grand scheme of things, but this instrument does look like it probably needs some attention, I would think. So a box full of used parts. So it's a violin, half-size student violin, and some other bits and bobs there. A few really old cello tailpieces and things. Don't think there's anything super interesting there. 40 to 60, well, probably at the lower end. 40 is probably okay, but you never know, there might be something in there that you didn't spot. Here's 2 violins and a banjo kind of thing here. These look to be kind of pretty low end violins from afar, but things can be misleading and it's easy to get things wrong, so it is worth studying photos where you can. but I think we can pretty safely say that this is probably a trade instrument. But once again, like, fair play to Tennants for adding a few more pictures here. There's a bow here, almost looks like it may be silver mounted, might be just a bit misleading. Very tarnished kind of nickel, I think, so that is not an interesting bow as such. Anyway, 40 to 60, that's very fair, to be honest. I think that's a reasonable price for that lot. Another violin here with a label of Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume there, one bow and one stick. Okay, so bow there, that's a kind of tradey bow there. Let's see if we can, maybe it might be worth me zooming out a bit so we don't have to keep scrolling. 70 to 100, that's a fairly reasonable estimate there. Yeah, quite nice back on that, actually. Interesting violin. Let's have a look at the side profile here, see if there's any kind of interesting evidence of a neck graft or anything. So I think that's a fair estimate for this violin. So let's have a look at some other pictures. Don't think there's much in that, to be honest. Interesting, a stick stamped Dodd. And that could potentially be a more interesting bow than the other one. Wonder if that is the head of it. So 70 to 100, that's fair. Hard to say exactly from the pictures, but a nice enough back on that. Okay, Hawks and Son Magini violin. You see these quite a lot. That's a definite trade violin. There's a bow there. Let me zoom a little bit just to make this a bit easier here. We can always zoom in a bit further if needed. Once again, actually not too bad a back there. Looks almost like a bit of bird's eye maple there. That's the scroll shot there. See, there seems to be a stamp on this bow. Stentor, which is obviously going to be a Chinese bow. Another violin here, labelled Joan Carol Klotz, 100 to 1200 on that. Let's have a look at some of the details there. I don't think that this is really going to be anything other than a trade violin, but you never know. It's quite easy sometimes to make mistakes, especially from photos. Another violin here with a metronome. It's labelled Torelli. It's got a few bows here. I don't think any of them are too crazy. It's the instrument there on its own. 80 to 120, I think that's a fair estimate there. Another violin labelled Amati. Again, that looks like a fairly standard trade violin. Another violin here, illegible remnants of a label. This is looking a little bit more interesting here. 2 to 2.5. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting violin. Almost looks like some of this older French stuff. Like almost looks similar to the work of Vuillaume's father. I think I saw a violin recently very similar to this, which was attributed to Vuillaume's father. I can't remember the name now, it's escaped me, but this similar, I think I said in the video that I thought it looked absolutely horrible, a violin, because these kind of weird corners, and this FL was very, very similar looking. I can't remember the father's name, a bit of a mind blank, but anyway, 2 to 2.5. It's probably not an unreasonable kind of estimate, really, to be fair, on that. So yeah, interesting looking violin. Another one here with their Colin Mazat label. They got 2 to 3 on this. So these Colin Mazat things always sell pretty well. Kind of interesting corner work there. Let's have a look at the back. One of those ones that you'd want to have a look in person, but it's, it's could be what it's labelled as. It's definitely possible, and that estimate would be about right. Another violin here, 70 to 100. It's got a bow that looks like your standard kind of trade violin there, and the bow just says Prima 200. I think it's just some budget thing. Another violin with a Strad label. Always worth having a look at these things though. It's not too bad, a kind of piece of wood on the back actually for that. It's kind of fine condition, is not too bad. 2 to 300, I think that's actually quite reasonable. Another violin here, H. Darazi, a Mirko, 3 to 4. Okay, so it's fairly, looks like probably 2 silver mounted bows there as well, which would bump up the estimate. So again, it is quite possibly in that circle, as it's difficult with all of this labelling, but yeah, not too bad, interesting. With this kind of case as well, once again, all this stuff you'd really want to look at it in person, especially the French stuff where you get a lot of dodgy labels and things floating about. So yeah, it looks like a couple of bows of potential interest. Swiss made, maybe that's some kind of one bow stamp, J.A. Romney. Maybe this is like a Finkel or something like that. It's hard to know, but interesting. Violin, labelled Nicholas Amatus Cremona, 2 to 300. That is an awesome scroll. Look at that. That's pretty interesting scrolls. Not the kind of scroll I'd kind of associate with the rest of the violin here, which looks pretty standard fare. So yeah, interesting. It's like a very normal looking violin, but that scroll is really quite cool. Quite interesting from the front. I like that. That's interesting. No, I don't think there's any evidence of a graft or anything like that. But yeah, curious. That really cool scroll. 2 to 300 on that. Another violin here, a Strad label. So again, I don't think we're gonna see anything too crazy here. Looks fairly standard. There's a bow with a bone button there. Let's have a look at this other bow. It looks like a nickel kind of budget bow, but 70 to 100, I think that's, yeah, fair price. Another violin with a Strad label and a bow, 50 to 80 on that. It's looking a little bit rough around the edges in a few places. Yeah, it's looking a little bit curious. Looks like it probably a trade violin of some kind, but it's looking a little bit yeah, a little bit sorry for itself. Right, another violin here, no label, 2 bows. Let's have a look at this. Curious button. Maybe a bit more interesting than the average kind of usual thing, but I'm not sure if it's anything too crazy. 70 to 100. Another violin here, indistinct label in French, dated 1813. A couple of bows there. Once again, yeah, quite interesting outline on that. Be curious to see what the back is like. It's quite a nice looking violin. I think 80 to 120 is, yeah, don't have any problem with that estimate at all. Yeah, that's quite a curious one. Oh, there's some other pictures appeared here as well. See what that says. Not going to try and read that at the moment, but at least they're showing a few more images. Here's the scroll, net graft on that. Quite interesting varnish. Those colours are way better than the pictures they got up here. Here's a picture of the button. That's quite nice. Needs a bit of repair there. Does look like it could be some kind of French thing. That's quite interesting varnish on the back there. I think that's an interesting violin. 80 to 120. I don't think you can go wrong with that, to be fair. Violin, labelled John Askew, Stanhope, 1872. Yeah, this is a maker that sounds familiar, this name, or this Stanhope. This may be something in an Amati auction or something. It's definitely got some individuality. This interesting purfling as well, this kind of white purfling. Yeah, I mean, it looks interesting enough. This estimate seems a bit high, to be honest, but nevertheless. Okay, so violin, labelled Dominicus Reef in Tyrol, estimate 200 to 300. This looks familiar. I wonder if this has been on a previous Tennants auction or some other auction. I don't know. Obviously, the front is had a bit of a hard life. Really cool looking scroll there, like that. It's quite interesting. There in its case. Yeah, curious looking thing. 200 to 300. That's completely fine. Another violin here with two bows, 80 to 120. This looks almost like one of those kind of Hopf type violins. Interesting to see what the back looks like. Yeah, it's that kind of thing, I think. Nothing too crazy in my opinion, but don't go with what I say necessarily. This is just my own thoughts. Another violin and a couple of bows here. This one definitely looks like something like a Czech trade violin or something like that. Kind of interesting looking wood. Pretty bizarre purfling, but very kind of chippy, plasticky varnish. But 40 to 60, I think that's more than fine. Okay, violin with certificate of authenticity from John Dilworth. In my opinion, the work of Giorgio Beerhoff, made in Naples, 1750, 10 to 12,000 on that. That scroll is absolutely amazing. I mean, if it has like a genuine certificate from John Dilworth, then I think that's pretty good thing to have. Interesting looking violin. One would kind of wonder, if it's such a high value item, let's see why they don't have more pictures. I find that kind of odd, but that scroll, look at that. That is a pretty epic scroll there. Yeah, interesting looking violin for sure. That would definitely be worth looking at. I feel like these pictures, these images are really oversaturated and just too shiny on Tennants, so I think they need a lot of work really. But yeah, amazing looking scroll, very cool. I like that a lot, so definitely one to watch. I'm sure dealers are watching that one. Right, violin. No kind of label. There's a bow there as well. Let's have a look at this. Looks fairly tradey, I think. Yeah, that's a kind of trade instrument, nothing too crazy there. Oh, another violin here. Fingerboard, boxwood pegs, floral decoration to tailpiece, 200 to 300. This is quite interesting looking violin. Cool scroll as well. In a pretty bad state by all accounts, but nevertheless, kind of like that. Yes, needs a lot of work, but interesting violin. Let's have a look at the back. Yeah, I think that one's another one that's probably going to do pretty well. 200 to 300 on it. Let's have a look at the scroll here. Interesting. It doesn't seem to have a neck graft there that I can see. Could of course be grafted at the heel, but we don't see that. Receipt dated 1896. Yeah, interesting. A couple of bows, curious as well. Broken one. It's unfortunate. Yeah, interesting looking one. Violinists had extensive work, probably with the replacement neck, head and button, head crack around bass bar. Yeah, another one that would be really interesting to look at in person. Another violin, labelled F.T. Simpson, Dunmow, Essex, 1919, 1200 to 1400. Okay, we've got some other pictures here in the thing. You can see kind of some of the varnish there. See how different the pictures are. Like, you know, even when I take pictures and videos, you can see a massive difference between different lighting, but I feel that the lighting that they choose for the main images is really quite poor, so I think they could work on a bit better lighting for their images, because some of these, this is like a lot clearer colour. If they could perhaps change the way they do their photography, might be a bit better. Another violin here, labelled Sepp Hornsteiner, Mittenwald. Okay, violin here, estimate 3 to 400. Just your standard thing again. Violin bass, stamped Hawks and Sons, VO model. Not really sure about who made or where these Hawks and Sons bows came from, actually. So if anyone knows, please say. That'd be interesting to know. Soprano saxophone here, unbranded. Maybe we can zoom in a bit to make things a bit easier. 80 to 120 on that. So we are out of the violin world now. Alto saxophone, made by CG Con Limited. Okay, we've got 70 to 100 on that. Another alto saxophone, Earlham Professional Series, 80 to 120. Alto saxophone by Vito, 80 to 120. Do need to learn a bit more about saxophones, to be honest. I only know Selma. I was going to say earlier, every time there's a saxophone, there's always a Selma saxophone. If there's more than one saxophone, you know there's going to be some kind of Selma. So here we go, 1955, 3 to 4,000. You can't really argue with that. We know that these Selma saxophones are super popular. Lots of pictures, so kudos to Tennants for that. So if you are a saxophonist, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this stuff. So interesting receipts there as well. So yeah, that's curious. Tenor saxophone, another Selma, yeah, 3 to 4 is really interesting how you get a few of these together. TJJ, the horn alto saxophone even, 120 to 180. An English classical bassoon, 6 brass keys and brass rings, main joint, stamped W. Millhouse, London, 337 Oxford Street, all joint stamped with maker's name, with 2 crooks and reeds, 3 to 400. Now Millhouse, I think, was really quite a famous maker of bassoons, so this could well be quite interesting for someone, and possibly 3 to 400, not an unreasonable price. Clarinet in the key of A, buffet crampon there. A flute by Gemeinhardt, 3 to 500. Solid silver body, okay, interesting. A flute by Trevor James. Flute by W.M.S. Haynes, Boston, Massachusetts, 1500 to 2000. Once again, don't know a lot about flutes, so if you do know, please say. Wooden flute, Bateman Ripon, 1839. Okay, interesting, could be an interesting flute there, 80 to 120. Wooden flute by Ruddle and Rose, circa 1838, 800 to 1200. Lots more pictures on this as well. So I wonder if they're putting these extra photos on out of their own accord, or just because they've been asked, really. But there is mileage in putting extra pictures on. Wooden flute by William Henry Potter, 80 to 120 there. various recorders, Kung, Adler, etc. Could be of interest to some people there. Concertina, always got to have a concertina. English system, no maker. Okay, interesting. 50 to 100, that is guaranteed to sell for more, I'm almost certain. Crucianelli Magic Vox S electronic accordion, 70 to 100. Flutina, okay, it's like a kind of German accordion of some kind, I guess. So looks quite nice. Button accordion. Okay, condenser microphone and an amp, and loads of little bits, a little bit away from what we're interested in. Bagpipes by MacLeod with extra chanter, 120 to 180. Besson New Creation Class A trumpet and a few other things. Looks like a bit of a clarinet here, and some mutes and a bugle, etc. So a whole load of stuff going on there. Celtic mini harp, okay, 50 to 80. Not sure that these are all that good. Collection of accessories. Hohner Erica button melodeon and a little kind of banjo kind of thing. A few other bits. Korg electronic stage piano. Roland Aerophone model AE10. Okay, interesting. Roland Micro Composer synth. Studio equipment, rack mounted stuff. Let's see what else we got here. Zildjian hi-hat cymbals pair and a Premier kind of kick pedal there. Some other cymbal bits. Gen Electronica synth tone SX1000 synth, 100 to 150. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if these are kind of popular or not. Herman Carlton Levin classical guitar made in Sweden, 250 to 350. So some of these Levins are quite popular and worth a bit of money. Interesting rosette there. Not sure about this particular model though. Acoustic guitar by Gibson. Okay, interesting. Sunburst finish. Kalamazoo. Okay, so that's going to be popular. 2 to 300. I think that would probably do quite well. It's their kind of lower tier stuff. Aria Pro 2 model PE1000 electric guitar, made in Japan. These can be pretty good. 3 to 400 on that. Aria the Sandpiper 12 string, 100 to 150. CF Martin and Co acoustic guitar, Trebolo 28, 700 to 1000. Okay, looks kind of quite nice. I don't know what the going rate is for these. Classical guitar, Manuel Rodriguez, 2 to 300. I don't think that's a super high-end model. Classical guitar by Antonio Sanchez. Again, this looks like it's not maybe super high-end. Jose Ramirez there. So someone maybe had a collection of classicals, nothing too crazy so far. Fender limited edition American Propine Jazzmaster electric guitar, 1000 to 1500. So nice neck on that. Fender Esquire Classic Vibe bass guitar. Interesting. That's kind of interesting model. Yeah, that's curious. Right, Fender Stratocaster guitar, serial number L11885, 1963, Refinished body in Daphne blue with original neck with Fender decals. Okay, 10 to 15,000 on that. CITES article there. So probably of interest to someone that wants an old Fender on a budget because of the refinish. Gibson J200 there, 800 to 1200. Very photos are a bit washed out really. Gibson Les Paul standard there, 1000 to 1500. Lap steel there. Ozark Dobro guitar, 80 to 120. Rickenbacker 330 Jet Glow, 700 to 1000. That also doesn't seem like an unreasonable estimate actually, so I'm not sure what these go for these days, but that doesn't seem too crazy. Tenor guitar by Ozark. One of these Line 6 Variaxes, 100 to 150, that's fair enough. Black Star amp there. Fender Blues Deluxe reissue, 450 to 550. Nice. Boss Digital Recording Studio. Boss ME25 Guitar Effects. Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, 30 to 40 in original box speaker. Okay, interesting. Some related stuff, Line 6 pod, some other pedals and stuff. Marshall JMD 501 amplifier. Marshall JTM 30 valve amp, 4 to 600 there. Marshall MG 50 CFX amp. And some tape recorder, I think it's a bit away from us. Vox amplifier. Zoom effects here. 5-string banjo. Barnes and Mullins, that one. Banjo by EKO. Banjo by Ozark. Banjo 5-string by Ibanez, made in Japan, 2 to 300. I think we're getting towards the end of the instruments now. Another banjo heirloom model by Wildwood. Banjolele here from the 1930s. The Broadcaster. George Formby Banjolele. It's kind of signature model. And Gone Tone 5-string long neck tubaphone banjo. Okay, interesting. So that's 200 to 300 on that. So I think after this we get into some other bits and pieces that we probably don't really want to look at so much. Records and things a bit away, and then it's a few music boxes. So essentially we've kind of seen everything, and that's just to show you a bit of what happens there, and then it goes on to other scientific things. So yeah, there we go. That's been the musical instrument section of the Tennants auction. I actually think there's a few interesting things here across the board. Few interesting bowed things, definitely a few interesting plucked guitars, some woodwind stuff actually of note, especially that Millhouse bassoon, some couple of good saxophones as well, flutes. I mean, yeah, across the board some interesting things. So not a bad auction at all. So if you're interested in musical instruments, I think worth looking at this catalogue for sure. So once again, I'll put the link in the description. Check it out yourself. Any comments, questions, notice anything that I said that was stupid, whatever, just let me know. So thanks a lot for watching as always, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.